Okay, so today I'm going to talk to you guys about the A7 Mark III, the GH5, and the Ursa Mini Pro, and the GH5S if it arrives while I'm doing this talk to the camera. So for those that don't know who I am, I'm Daniel Peters. I'm thankful for the guys, Proav, for having me back on the channel. So the A7 Mark III, I wanted to test out because it's full frame for a very cheap price considering. The GH5, because I obviously use the GH5 with my Ursa Mini Pro, which I'm filming on now, and the GH5S to test, low light against this camera, because we all know Sony's very good at low light. But the GH5S hasn't showed up yet. So what I've been testing so far while I'm waiting for that to arrive is dynamic range. Now, I've been quite blown away by the dynamic range of the A7 Mark III. To put it in perspective, I mainly shoot on the Ursa Mini Pro. Now that sensor has 15 stops of dynamic range and it looks very, very nice. And the only thing to compare it to with the roll off and how it looks is very, very close to the Arri Alexa, so the Alexa Mini. And that is a very high quality camera, as we know, and that looks really great. Obviously it looks better than the Ursa Mini Pro. It has a slight better roll off, but the Ursa Mini Pro is very, very close. Now, we're not here to talk about the Ursa Mini Pro, we're here to mainly talk about the A7 Mark III. And to my findings, it's actually very, very close to the Ursa Mini Pro sensor, which is crazy. Now, what I also wanted to test was, because you can get up to 12-bit recording RAW with the Ursa Mini Pro and 10-bit, and the GH5 does 10-bit, is the dynamic range even worth using if it's only 8-bit on the Sony? Because you don't want skies banning, you don't want macro blocking in low light. And what I don't understand is they must have done something different with this camera, the way that it cools or something, because the 8-bit is holding up very, very good. And I'll show you some tests now that I did where I shot direct into the sunlight and just getting a house in the background, and the fact that it's holding the highlights well and you can see the house, it's just crazy. And then you're not really getting any banding from this at all. You might see it in the upload because of compression, but you will see a massive difference in dynamic range between the A7 Mark III and the GH5. And between these tests, because the settings are similar, the fact that this looks really close to the Ursa Mini Pro is crazy. So the other thing with the A7 Mark III and the Sony cameras is sometimes the skin tones can be a little bit weird. Now, to my test that I've been doing, unfortunately I'm the subject, haven't had many subjects with the times I've had this camera. Because the test that I'm doing that I'm in it, it was interesting to find out the differences between the camera. The Ursa Mini Pro skin tones look very, very nice to me. GH5 looks good. The Sony I did have to tweak a little bit because sometimes it can get a little bit yellow and not enough kind of pinkish look into the skin tone. So from using the GH5S on my last test, I found the colors to be a bit better on that camera. The low light is obviously better, but the dynamic range that I found was kind of the same. I want to hold exposure of the lamp and the bulb as well as outside. So when I do these tests, there's a reason why the bulb is facing the camera, because I just want to make sure I'm holding the bulb. Okay, so as you can see, the GH5S finally arrived. So just bear in mind the test that I'm doing, the tripod and everything and the lenses are staying exactly in place, using the same lenses, same ND. All I'm changing is between Super 35 and full frame, and then speed booster and just an EF to micro four thirds mount. So other features these cameras obviously have is the Ursa Mini, you got 4K 60p and it goes up to 120 frames in 1080p windowed crop sensor. And the GH5 goes up to obviously 180 frames in the 1080p mode and 60 frames 4K. The A7 Mark III doesn't do 4K 60p. It is NAB, so I don't know if anything's coming out yet. We've all seen the new pocket camera, which is pretty crazy. I guess we're ditching those cool jeans and having cargo pants to fit that baby in there because the specs are crazy. But this video is not about that one, so we're talking about this one. What I'll do is I'll do a test between, I'll mark it around the 100 frames mark on the camera. So I'll shoot 100 frames per second on this. I'll shoot it with a fake speed booster, and I'll shoot it with just the native sensor that comes out the camera. And then I'll shoot 100 frames on this camera, and I'll shoot that with the Super 35 mode and the full frame mode. So that's what's amazing about these cameras and the sensors. You got the GH5 or the GH5S, and whether you use a speed booster or not, the fact that you can get maximizing your lenses using the speed booster without the speed booster is pretty crazy. But I also love how the A7 Mark III lets you choose Super 35 mode or full frame mode. So you've got two very different looks there, and you're maximizing the lenses as long as you're using full frame lenses, because the Sigma 18 and 35 obviously won't work in full frame, but it will on Super 35, so that's cool. And then the Ursa Mini Pro is just Super 35, but when you shoot the 100 frames, 120 frames a second, it crops in, but it crops in quite a lot. So as we know, no camera's perfect and they're all annoying. The 120 frames on the Ursa Mini image will definitely look better than these, but because it crops in so much, sometimes it's hard to work with, and you will have a bit more noise. The 100 frames per second on this is a little soft, but there's no crop whatsoever, even in full frame, so that's really, really good to have if you need that, and you don't have to worry too much about noise when you're indoors with this. Now, the slow motion with the GH5 is good to have, but indoors it does get slightly noisy, especially if you don't have enough light, but it also doesn't crop in really, so that's really good as well. So that's the thing to bear in mind with the Ursa Mini Pro, is the crop in. So I love to shoot anamorphic a lot of the times as well, and the fact that the GH5 has ability to, you know, de-squeeze 2 times or 1.3 times in camera is really, really amazing to have. You can obviously use monitors as well, but because it de-squeezes in camera, that's really, really cool. The GH5S doesn't have the 6K 2 times mode for the 4x3 sensor, so you can only really shoot 1.33 times anamorphic on the GH5S. You can do 2 times, but you're not going to get as much resolution as the GH5, which is kind of annoying because you want the low light if you're shooting anamorphic as well. But 1.3 times on the GH5 looks great anyways. 1.3 times does look good in full frame mode and Super 35 mode on the A7 Mark III, but there's no 2 times mode because you're not really going to, you know, maximize the use of the sensor, the resolution. But anamorphic can be possible, but you can't view it in camera, so you do need a monitor like the Atomos, you know, Inferno, or even better yet, hopefully it still de-squeezes in the new Atomos 5-inch Ninja, I think it's called. Can't quite remember. So you do need to view that with a monitor. You can't view that in camera, so that's a little bit of a downside with the A7 Mark III if you love shooting anamorphic. One of the things that I like to do is set up the custom button. So in the menu, we're at page 2 in the custom keys, you just set them, you know, to what buttons you want, to how you want to set it up. And what I like to do is to set it up as, so C2 I have is a picture profile, so you can jump between them. So picture profile 7, you know, S-Log2, and then C1 I just have as the ISO, so I can jump between those real quick. The FN is obviously just left as normal because I can jump between my white balances really quick and change settings between manual if you want to vlog or whatever, you want everything to shut automatically, but obviously you shoot in manual. And C3, what I like to have is, because I shoot S-Log2 all the time, I don't really like S-Log3 for 8-bit, is C3 I have where I can quickly access whether I want to view, you know, the Rec 709 version in camera, to view it really quick, and if I don't, I just jump back out. So that's how I like to work with this camera, to make it as quick as possible. And then obviously S and Q on the top is your slow-mo, so you're instantly in slow-mo really quick, which is really nice to have. And that's the quickest way I think I can work through the camera, which worked pretty good. I have to send the A7 Mark III back to Sony today, and the GH5S just arrived. So it's not nighttime here by the time I have to send it back. So this is the best test I can do in the short amount of time that I have, because it's not nighttime. In the low light, the GH5S is amazingly good. The color looks good. Sometimes the colors might even look better than the Sony. But because the dynamic range is so good on the Sony A7 Mark III. As you can see, even though you can see in the dark, you gotta question yourself whether you really need to, because sometimes you're just blowing out highlights. So the same as how the GH5S and the GH5 performs in harsh conditions, the dynamic range isn't as good as the Ursa Mini Pro and the Sony A7 Mark III. So pay attention to the candle. Obviously the A7 Mark III is going to hold the candle detail better, the outline of the candle, whereas the GH5S, the candle is going to blow out and just lose a bit of the detail. Also at the back of the locker as well, you're going to see the detail look a little bit different between the GH5S and the A7 Mark III. That's about it for me today. I hope this helps you guys out. So many cameras to choose from, and you can't really go wrong. They're all great cameras, just depends on what look you're going for. And yeah, I'll check you guys next time.